Welcome to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are ready to get out of survival mode so they can focus on what matters most. This is where the burnout stops and the real talk starts. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Carter, and each week I sit down with healthcare innovators who get it. We will unpack the chaos, laugh through the hard stuff, and get you at least 2 practical tips you can use at work right away. If you're ready to clear the chaos and lead with impact, you've come to the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are ready to clear the chaos and lead with impact. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Carter, and today we are talking about a leadership expectation that almost every nurse leader has heard. You need to round more. But what happens when the workload is already impossible, the expectations keep growing, and nobody actually taught you how to round effectively? Today, I'm joined by Greta Rosler, founder of Radius Leaders, and someone I connected with through LinkedIn because I loved how practical and honest her leadership content was. And what really stood out to me about Greta's work is that she doesn't just tell leaders to be more visible. She teaches efficient leader rounding strategies that actually work in the real world of healthcare leadership. So welcome to the show, Greta.
Thank you, Megan. I'm so thrilled to be here because I feel the same about your work. So it's like we're in the same camp trying to fix the same problems in many ways. So I'm delighted to share ideas with you today.
Love it. This audience is going to get so much from this conversation today. So let's start here. Why do you think so many nurse leaders struggle with leader rounding, even though they know it's important?
Well, many times I liken the problems with leader rounding to similar things in our life when it comes to health and wellness, right? We know what we should do. We know we should exercise. We know we should lift weights or build muscle and all of those things. But often what it boils down to and what my experience has been is that leaders haven't been taught how to do it efficiently and for impact. There has been an assumption that because you're a nurse or you're a healthcare leader and you know how to care about people and you intrinsically are motivated for the right reasons, you should know how to round. And that is a complete misunderstanding that has really led many nurse leaders down the wrong path.
Yeah. I also think to add to that for my own experiences, and this may resound with the audiences, we would go forward with a big rounding initiative and we'd either internally or externally driven, we'd come up with this grand plan for rounding and it would tell us, the scripting, and we'd even have our iPads and the tools to do it. But what was lacking was how to have the time and the space to actually do it in the real world of a nurse leader's day-to-day lived experience. And what I love about what you're going to share today is how to work smarter, not harder, and make the most out of those, even if it's just a 60-second check-in. So I'm so excited for what you're going to offer to us. Give us the short version of your leadership journey and what led you to create Radius Leaders and kind of step into the entrepreneur role.
Well, I was a nurse manager in 2011. I became a nurse manager. I'd been a nursing supervisor. And on the first day of the job, my CNO, my predecessor for that department, handed me a Rolodex and said, I'll be upstairs if you need anything. You're going to be great. And my CNO showed up and said, all you need to focus on right now is just go round on every patient. And I was like, okay, well, I know how to round. I mean, I had been a supervisor, always doing service recovery, always rounding and talking to patients and staff. And what I quickly discovered was that I was really struggling to figure out how to have impact with the volume that I had to do. I had a 28-bed med-surg unit, then I got another unit, then I got a third unit. And to achieve impact with that volume became very hard and I really struggled. So I decided through a variety of things and circumstances that there was a different way to do it. And that's why I started Radius.
I love that. So what I hear you saying too is that wasn't actually a strategy like go forth and round. It's actually unintentionally, but it can actually set leaders up to fail. What do you feel like leaders were missing most at that moment? What were you missing? Was it the strategy, the training, kind of what was the gap for you?
Well, I was missing the ability to round efficiently and with a very specific goal. So I taught myself how to do it, right? I had read a bunch of books, really great books, Quint Studer books, all the things, teaching myself how to round. And those were really helpful resources. But I didn't really have any role models because that was before it was truly a robust hospital initiative. But my leaders, I guess, knew that I had been a nursing supervisor, so I could round, which was a little bit misguided because yes, I rounded in that role, but not from the vantage point of I need to engage my team. I need to fix all these quality problems. I need to prevent quality problems. And so it required this whole different lens and strategic skill level that I didn't have. And what I realized is that yes, it was setting me up for failure, but I worked through it. But then as I moved into a patient experience leadership role and I was helping other leaders with it, I started realizing that, wow, it wasn't just me. It was happening everywhere. And everyone was struggling without a system to round in a way that was efficient, but also impactful.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. What do you think right now, because you work with clients like I do in real time around the country, what are healthcare leaders dealing with right now that makes rounding feel so difficult to sustain, in your opinion?
Well, I don't have to tell you, you know firsthand the level of burden that healthcare leaders and especially nurse leaders have on them. And I say that with bias because I'm a nurse leader and I work primarily with nurse leaders, but the level of burden that they encounter just from the system pressure on them. Everything comes back to nursing. We know that to be true. When another department can't fix it, nursing is tasked with fixing it because we're the closest to the patient and the closest to care delivery. So it's a blessing and a curse. And what they're really struggling with is how do I fit this necessary thing in this obscure way that I've been encouraged to do it amidst all of these other demands. And what I experience is that there is by no fault of their own, leaders have not viewed it for what it really is. It is really meant to be the foundation to what you're doing and the fix to the stuff you're trying to problem solve. And it
Yes.
can be all those things, but they're struggling with how do I fit this in as a task, but not realizing how dynamic and actually helpful it can be if it's done the right way.
I love that. I love that. I feel like there's also this moment of expectations, like what I think it's important for us to acknowledge what it's like emotionally for leaders when they feel like they're repeating themselves and their expectations with their team over and over and over again and nothing changes. Like what are you hearing from your clients on that?
It's so frustrating and disheartening to see that. And you see it too in your work where leaders are told, like, go out. And they're like, I am out in my department all day and my outcomes aren't changing and people are still falling on the floor. And I still
Mhm.
have staff turning over at a rate that exceeds what I would want. It's
Oh,
so defeating for
yeah,
them that they almost implicitly start to give up.
sure.
And I observe this sense of, and I have goosebumps just saying it because it makes me so sad that we've not equipped them with tools that make them feel like they can actually do it.
Mm,
And I go back to if you're trying to lose a few pounds or you're trying to get healthier and you're just like, well, I better eat better and I better exercise more. That is so defeating when you don't see a result. If you have a system, if you have you can focus your energy, you come away feeling confident. But these poor leaders are like, I don't have time for this. It's not solving my problems. And by the way, when I go out in my department, I'm stuck out there and I'm stuck fixing everybody else's problems. So no
right.
wonder they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And that really resonates with me because I remember for as much as I love rounding, I remember at the end of my role as a manager feeling that way. I
Yeah.
had almost 150 direct reports. I was trying to fix big problems that had been handed to me. I couldn't do it all without a system and the right structure. And it was
Yeah.
so defeating as a person. I felt like I am failing.
Right.
And now I can see I wasn't. I was just a product of the system, but I really felt then committed, like I have to help people find a better way.
And I think that's so important to acknowledge because as the leader, we're accountable for those outcomes. We're accountable for whether not just process, but the actual outcome metrics themselves. And we're sitting in a room and they're asking us, why hasn't your unit moved the needle? It's like, how much time do you have? I can tell you what all the problems are without the capacity and the support to do it well. I feel like a human punching bag. And also, if you've been a leader for a long time, we've all lived through multiple iterations of rounding initiatives. And so if I've been in this role for 10 years and this is the fourth time we're attempting to reinstill, rounding, bedside reporting, right? The change fatigue can be real. And
Mm,
so I think we've done I think you do such a great job of acknowledging where they are internally, the factors that are external, and reminding them they aren't broken. It's the system itself, which is
yeah.
beautiful. So if the answer isn't just to round more, because we know that's not the answer, let's talk about what actually works. So let's focus on efficient leader rounds. So you've emphasized that rounding has to be efficient or leaders simply won't sustain it. Tell us more. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's just like anything. So leaders have a million things, like they might come in today and have 7 hours of meetings and 2 hours worth of follow-ups at least. And I'm just putting a parameter on it, but it's far more than that. So if they are then told to go out and round and they feel like it becomes this infinite endeavor that's never ending of tasks and things being handed to them. And this is what we see in our workshops. People they're like, yes, that's it. I show this picture where a leader comes away with all these sticky notes all over their head and their face and their body, because that's how they feel when they're done rounding. So if they come away like that, even if they round it efficiently, they need also a process where they can efficiently manage the output of rounding. And I don't mean the report from their electronic rounding tool. I mean what they saw as a leader that they have to deal with. And so what I mean by efficiency is giving them a tool that lets them navigate around in 3 to 5 minutes, whether it be with patients or staff, and that's the median time we can upskill them to do, and then giving them a process for what do I do with the information I learned, which is hopefully strategically aligned with my leader priorities.
Yeah. Yeah, what to do with, and I think some of the resistance, if we're going to be super honest, which we are on the show, reticence, and this is reflective of myself and others in the moment, is, okay, if I go and start my rounds now, I know for a fact I'm going to open some cans of worms that are going to create more work for me. So my bias subconsciously, even though I tried, to be my best self, is, do I really want to open up more issues for me to deal with? And I love that you've acknowledged that with some solutions. So what does effective, efficient rounding actually look like in practice based on the work that you're doing?
So it looks like first addressing what you just described. And I call that, in our workshops, I call that rounding hesitancy. And that's my term. That's not anywhere in the literature, which, by the way, there's not a lot of great literature about rounding, and not a lot of current empirical evidence to show us rounding methodology that works, that doesn't, which is why I'm trying to change that through my doctoral stuff. But it's first addressing rounding hesitancy, the notion that I don't want to round because these things happen, and that's okay. Let's acknowledge that. Then we have to push past that and say, okay, what are your goals for rounding? Yeah. What would your ideal round give you back? Right. We have to make it germane to each leader and really emphasize on a priority and a focal point, which in many cases, many of us had been taught to round in this very altruistic, universal way. How has everything been? How are you? How was your care? All these things that are well-intended, but lead leaders down an inefficient, ineffective path to actually get an outcome out of the round. Yeah. And so what I've experienced is they reclaim their purpose in the round, but they reclaim this sense of confidence and control when you help them focus that conversation with the right questions and efficiency, so they can get in and get out, which goes against our nurse heart, right? We want to be in there doing all the things, asking all the questions, talking about all the problems. And our job is not to be the fixer of all things in that moment. It is to be a trusting ear, a face of leadership and reason, and to build trust with the patient and the staff in a very quick moment. So that requires a highly tactical approach.
Absolutely. And that's often what's missing in the training, assuming there is any training. I mean, I feel like the only training I got was on the tool itself, how to input the round. And you're lucky if you get that, right? Tell us about how you can use rounding to improve kind of accountability and culture. So how can leader rounding help address issues like patient safety, communication gaps, incivility, that sort of thing?
Well, and that's the thing. Leaders are often setting out to round, and leaders will say, I spend all day in my department. I'm rounding all day. And that type of rounding does not impact those things, like you have a high fall rate or a fall rate that exceeds the NDNQI benchmark or is above the benchmark, I'll say. Yeah. You have incivility issues that are happening insidiously through your department. If you want to impact those issues, you have to go out and specifically look for them in a finite window of time with specific questions and goals for your observations. And oftentimes leaders, very well-intended, very thoughtful and wonderful leaders, go out with the intent that the more I stay out here and help my team, the more I will help the outcomes. And actually the opposite is true. The more you go out strategically in a confined period of time with a set of rounding questions, goals, and objectives, the more you come away with actionable things you can take action on as a leader and fix problems. And rounding has to be the foundation of what you do, but the fix to everything. It can't be what I'm going to do all day long to hopefully fix the problem.
Yeah. Do you have an example of one of the questions that you find is really transformational? Like just the wording of it that really kind of gets the most bang for their buck? Like if I could go up to my nurse and ask them one question for this purpose, how would you word that question?
So if you're rounding on a patient or you're rounding on a staff or a staff person. So the skills we teach, right, are transferable for patients or staff. We teach perioperative leaders how to round on staff. We teach ED leaders how to do both. We teach labor and delivery leaders how to round on patients who aren't laboring, but in the postpartum period, but staff who are caring for laboring patients. So these skills are transferable. The question, there's a variety of questions we teach them to ask and to gently dig for information, gently
Yeah.
and efficiently.
Yeah.
But the real hallmark transition happens, Megan, when they switch from closed-ended to open-ended questions.
Mm.
So did your nurses do report is usually met with one less helpful type of answer. Or did they do report at the bedside? Versus our goal is to make sure you're included in your care. How's that been going?
Mm. Yeah.
And that opens a whole window of opportunity for conversation that did nurses come in and do bedside report just shuts down.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's so practical. So once the leader gains that information during that round, what should they actually do with it?
Well, I always say, I teach in all of our workshops. I'll get real excited about the rounding workshop and I say, oh my gosh, I love teaching rounding. And rounding is actually less important than what you do with the information after, no matter how you glean it, although I hope you glean it using a strategic approach. Once you get that information, the round is only as good as the conversation and performance management that follows it. So if you are rounding strategically with the right intent, focusing on the right things, the right people, etc., which has to be strategic to have an impact, then a leader needs to have a relationally centered engagement approach to approach their team without having to take on all their work.
Mm.
So very well-intended leaders, you have done this, I've done it. I do it every time I round with someone. I'm out there cleaning up trays, dumping urinals, picking linen up off the floor. And of course, we never advocate for leaders to leave safety stuff undone. And there's a point where the leader reaches their breaking point. So without the right approach and giving them a tool to say, okay, you found all these things. What are you going to do with it? And how are you going to follow up to minimize the amount of time you have to do this in perpetuity?
Yeah.
We give them a tool so that they can go out and have a relational, authentically leadership-centered conversation with their team member that minimizes their extra workload as a result.
So give me an example of what that sounds like. So let's say I'm the staff member and you're the leader. What's an example of what that appropriate follow-up sounds like?
So what typically happens now, like how it happens today in a regular hospital across America where leaders are rounding and they come across a bunch of stuff. One of the most common examples is a patient says they don't know their plan of care. So the leader who wants to solve the problem, because nurses are fixers, the leader will go out with the best intention, approach the nurse who's caring for the patient and say, Mr. Gonzalez doesn't know his plan. Can you go in and update him? I saw his whiteboard wasn't updated. Have they rounded yet? They go through this whole litany of task-oriented questions back and forth. It goes back again to the open-ended question. First, let's think about how the nurse themselves is doing. So, how's your day going? Saw you were off this weekend. Hope you got to do, having some relationally grounding component to it.
Yeah.
How's your assignment? I know you have a busy workload today. We could make that assumption 9 times out of 10 for most employees. When we hear how their day is going, we start to get glimmers of information. Okay, now we're going to start some open-ended questions. I just rounded on Mr. Gonzalez. What do you know about what's happening for him today? Do they even know the plan? Let's hear what's getting in their way of communicating it. Let's hear where they're at. So we give them a framework. It's called the Reach Your Team framework, where we give them a couple of steps to keep the dialogue going with the employee while cultivating engagement versus alienation. So the end goal is we want the nurse or the staff member to engage in the solution instead of the nurse leader having to take on updating Mr. Gonzalez, making sure he gets out of bed, taking him to the bathroom, all the things.
Right.
We want that to engage. So it's open-ended questions and it's relationship in that moment.
I love that. It's so interesting as you're describing that. My mind wandered to the example of the administrator in the show The Pit. And I don't know if you've seen it, but I think it's like the first episode of the entire series. They have this woman playing this very stern administrator who walks down in a starched suit with her administrator badge and walks up to Noah Wiley's character, the ER doc, and just starts telling him all the reason all the metrics are wrong. And I'm thinking, I personally never reported to nor led anybody that way. But it's interesting that that's clinicians' perspective, and it's valid because, to your point, when they are also in survival mode, they're drowning. We know that as their leader. We know what it's like to be a nurse, and there's reticence to want to feel like we're piling on more. So I love that you took a human approach to it, which would have made the scene very different in the pit, which is, hey, how's it going? I can see it's busy. Is there anything that's top of mind that's a safety concern for you right now in this moment? And hey, by the way, I checked on your patient. Here's what's going well. Told me they weren't sure about the plan of care. Is that something you feel like you can update them on? It's less of here's what's wrong, fix it, and walk away. And it's more, let's show them how much we actually care about them as a whole person. There's a lot of that missing. And I think it's unintentional because nurse leaders and healthcare leaders are just in survival mode themselves. But it was interesting how big that gap is, and to see it portrayed through Hollywood kind of broke my heart, but also I get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. I watched a few episodes of that show, and there were parts where like the nurse manager trying to leave to get out for her kids something at school, and you could feel the pain of what's real in the hospital, which is this juggle that nurse leaders and other healthcare leaders are doing constantly between their regular life, their work life, how to balance the two. And, Megan, what happens in that instance all the time is the nurse leader feels the need to not burden anyone else. Right. So they take on all kinds of things. And many times when I'm doing coaching rounds with people, I'll say, you're about to take on the role of what could be the nurse or the care manager. What is stopping you from engaging them in this solution versus what you're about to do, which is try to do it yourself. And oftentimes it's just this sort of altruistic goal. I just don't want to burden anybody else. But what that means is then you're going to get 5 rounds done as opposed to 8, which they can't round for you. Only you can round. And so it's a combination of things. We have to help them see the value in rounding more and small changes to get more rounds done, but also handing things back to their team in a way that empowers them and isn't this punitive, like big brother exercise.
Yeah. I love that you touched on what they can solve through rounding, because I want to make sure we hit this before we start to close is, a lot of leaders do feel pressure to solve engagement problems. Often we default to things like meetings and emails. What in your mind makes rounding more effective than those approaches?
Well, there's several things. First of all, I have this graphic. If people follow me on LinkedIn, they've probably seen it, where I say, why rounding? Why do we always start with rounding? Anytime an organization asks me for help with their nurse leaders, we always come back to rounding as a start, because I realize when we don't, we end up coming back to rounding, because rounding uniquely positions the leader to understand what is happening in their department in real time. There is no other way to do that. Feedback in a meeting won't do it the same way. Sending out emails and getting emails back, or polls, and there's lots of cool ways to engage your team now. All those things are very valuable. They will not enable you to see firsthand in real time what is happening the way rounding will. It won't allow you to capture it and track it the way rounding will. And I think one of the most beneficial things that rounding does, particularly when rounding on patients, is rounding is an opportunity for leaders to role model. And the example I often give is, I've seen this many times, is gowning and garbing for isolation patients. You'll see staff often cutting corners in that way, or policies have been loosened over time or perceived more loosely in an organization. And when the leader starts really demonstrating that they're just putting on a gown to go in and talk to a patient, it sends a very strong message to the team of what is and isn't acceptable. That's just one example. Yeah. Or when a leader comes out and really questions if somebody's fall precautions are right. Not are the bed alarms on or not, but are the fall precautions really right for this patient? That is role modeling to the team what they ought to be thinking about, and rounding is the only way to do that.
I love it. And I also hear you describing, if you do rounds well and you do them consistently, we are reducing the need for meetings and emails,
100%.
which I think is huge. Yeah, that's 100%. A huge takeaway for leaders. Yeah. So even though it feels like one more thing to do, if you do it the right way, efficiently, we're not saying take a lot of time, we're saying do it strategically, fewer meetings, fewer emails, which who wouldn't want to sign up for that? That's amazing.
That's right.
What is, as we close, Greta, what's one small rounding habit leaders could implement this week if I'm listening to this episode?
What leaders could implement this week is, I would say the first thing most leaders need to do is look at, do they have rounding time blocked? And are they using it to get enough rounds done? So in organizations, it's not uncommon. They have 1 hour blocked or 2 hours or something per day, or a couple times a week. And I would encourage any leader to reflect on how many rounds am I getting done in that window? And if I'm not getting rounds done, I want to be honest with myself about what is stopping me. Is it that I don't feel comfortable rounding? Is it that I don't have anyone to delegate to? Is it that I just don't want to walk into the mess that's out there? Or is it that I truly need to find a different time or a different system? Or I need more skills? That's the first piece, is reflecting on what's stopping me, and let's get honest about it. Is it that the tool I use is cumbersome? The tool is not the round. So that is often a barrier. Is the tool stopping me? So that's the first thing I would encourage leaders to get real honest about.
I love that. That's great. I know that you're also offering our audience a special discount on your rounding e-learning resources. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure thing. So we have a 6-module series that teaches you the Win Your Round framework. And that is really actionable, really precise, and also really efficient. And it's efficient to take it and it's efficient to use it. So the e-learning modules are going to be, you're going to get $50 off for a month after this publishes. So through mid-July, through July 17th, you'll get $50 off that 6-session learning series online. Each module is about 15 minutes. So $50 off if you email our training team, No Chaos. And I know you'll put this in our email in the show notes and stuff. Yeah. Also, you can use the same discount code, No Chaos, on our website for 50% off any of our we have several small ticket resources that can help you with rounding or with performance conversations, things like that. So No Chaos on the website, No Chaos for e-learning. And that's in honor of your Chaos Whisperer movement, Megan.
Love that. Thank you for offering that. I know there's so many people who would benefit from that. So that's going to be a great resource for them. So we like to close out the episode, Greta. I usually like to ask sort of some rapid fire fun questions, because we do talk a lot about what we're struggling with, what's wrong, what's broken, but there's a lot that goes well too in healthcare. So to end on a high note, what do you feel like is the most underrated leadership habit, if you could name one?
It is time planning blocks. So, and I know this is something that really speaks to probably your heart, but it is taking time to plan time. Most leaders don't do that. And I find when they start doing it and taking control, they gain control and confidence and all the things.
Love that. I love that. That's awesome. Well, Greta, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. I know there was a lot of gems in there. And for the listeners, all of her practical tips, the direct link to use that code for her resources, you can find all of that in our show notes. And if people want to continue to connect with you, Greta, where should we send them? Where would you like people to connect with you further?
You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. So Greta Rosler, there's only one of me. And thankfully, many people might say thankfully, my kids especially. You can find me on LinkedIn or go to our website, www.radiusleaders.com. And you can book a call via there. You can download free resources. You can look up the resources I just mentioned. And those are the best 2 places.
Love it. Awesome. And all of that is in the show notes, folks. And again, Greta, I just want to tell you how grateful I am for your time and your wisdom today. Thank you for everything that you're doing for our precious nurse leaders.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for having me. Okay. Right.
Thanks for joining us on the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to follow this podcast, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. I'm Dr. Megan Carter, and I will be back next week with more real talk, fresh strategies, and guests who are redefining what it means to lead with impact. Want to keep the conversation going? Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and download free tools and resources from my website. Both links are in the show notes. Let's heal this broken healthcare system together, one day at a time.